Welcome to Revenge Stories, where justice finds its voice. Hey there, friend. Ever been betrayed? Lied to? Felt the sting of someone walking away when you needed them most? You're not alone. Here, we share the most jaw-dropping revenge stories from cheaters getting what they deserve to manipulative families falling apart. Every twist will keep you on edge, and every moment of justice will leave you satisfied. So grab your headphones, sit back, and let these stories pull you in. Because sometimes the best endings are the ones they never saw coming. Follow now and don't miss a single moment of payback. I didn't need an alarm clock anymore. Jonathan's late nights and early mornings, the hushed phone calls he thought I couldn't hear, and the sheer distance growing between us, those were all the alarms I needed. But the one that jolted me awake, the one that told me something was truly irreversibly broken, came in the form of a simple, instinctive action. It was 6:15 a.m. His phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a notification as I reached over to turn off his alarm. Just as my fingertips brushed the cool glass, his hand shot out like a striking viper, snatching it away with a force that startled me. For a second, we just stared at each other in the dim glow of dawn. His eyes were wide, almost frantic, before he forced a lazy smirk onto his face. "Sorry, babe," he murmured, rolling over and tucking the phone under his pillow. Work stuff, the excuse that had become his mantra. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart drumming out a rhythm of doubt. I wanted to let it go, to chalk it up to morning paranoia. But as I turned my head, my gaze landed on the carefully wrapped gift box on his bedside table. The $5,000 watch I had spent months saving for, the one I knew he'd wanted for ages. He had unwrapped it the night before, barely sparing it a glance before setting it aside, his attention elsewhere. No excitement, no gratitude, just indifference. It felt like a slap, but I didn't react. No, I simply observed. I noted the way he carried himself now, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he locked his phone the moment I stepped into the room, the way his presence had become more of a ghost than a partner. That morning, as he showered, I picked up his phone from under the pillow. My fingers hesitated over the screen, but the familiar sting of betrayal already simmered beneath my skin. I didn't need to unlock it to know the truth. Something was there. Something ugly. Something he was hiding. I placed it back before he could notice, my pulse steady. Confrontation? No, that wasn't my style. Not yet. Later that day, my best friend Kate sent me a message that turned my quiet suspicions into a roaring certainty. "Don't freak out, but you need to see this." Attached was a screenshot. Jonathan's dating profile. A fresh one, complete with a picture I had taken of him just last month at our anniversary dinner. Status: single and ready for new adventures. I felt my stomach twist. My chest constricted, but not with sadness. Not anymore. What replaced it was something sharper, something colder. Revenge wasn't my first thought. It was my second. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. Instead, I did what I had always done best I planned. While Jonathan slept that night, I sat in the dark, my laptop screen illuminating the room with a cold blue glow. He had deleted his browsing history, but he had underestimated me. His cloud storage, the one we shared, held every secret he thought he had erased. And oh, what a collection it was. Multiple accounts, flirtatious conversations, plans to meet up, and then the message that sealed his fate. "Alicia's boring. Too focused on work. I just need to stay put until the promotion comes through. Then I'm out." I exhaled slowly, a slow, eerie calm washing over me. He thought I was a stepping stone, a temporary fixture. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I closed the laptop, my mind already weaving a web he wouldn't see until it was too late. He wanted to play games? Fine. I would make sure he lost everything. Kate's message was still open on my screen, that damning screenshot burning itself into my retinas. Jonathan, my husband, a married man, out there in the digital abyss, selling himself as an eligible, adventurous bachelor. I felt my throat tighten, a slow pressure building behind my ribs, but no tears came. Tears were for grief. Tears were for sadness. This was something else entirely. I sat motionless for a long moment, my pulse slowing, my mind sharpening. My body wanted to shake with rage, but I wouldn't let it. No. Rage was useless unless it was controlled. My hands trembled only once when I finally reached for my laptop. Then, as if possessed by something cold and calculating, I began. I started with his phone. Jonathan thought he was careful. He wasn't. His mistake was arrogance, his belief that I would never suspect, never check, never see beyond the carefully constructed veil of his double life. He had deleted his messages. He had wiped his browser history. But he had forgotten the most important thing, the cloud backup we shared. The same cloud that stored vacation photos and old tax documents also held echoes of his secrets. And secrets, no matter how well buried, always find their way to the surface. With a few keystrokes, I unspooled the tangled threads of his betrayal. It was all there. The messages, the photos, the plans. You're the most exciting woman I've ever met. My wife doesn't understand me. She's just there. I'm technically married, yeah, but emotionally, completely free. I let out a slow breath, pressing my fingers hard against the table to keep them from curling into fists. How easy it was for him to compartmentalize, to pretend. I kept scrolling. The lies piled higher and higher, a disgusting monument to his deception. Then I found the one message that shifted something inside me. I just need to wait for my promotion. Once that happens, I'll have the financial stability to leave. I stopped. Read it again. And again. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning. Not a mistake. Not a drunken lapse in judgment. No. A calculated, methodical plan to discard me the moment I had outlived my usefulness. The anger that simmered inside me turned into something else entirely. Something deep. Something dark. Something that curled through my veins like ice water. He thought he had time. He thought he had control. He was wrong. A soft vibration from my phone yanked me out of my trance. Kate? Alicia? Say something. Are you okay? I stared at the words for a moment before typing back. I'm fine. A pause. Then another message. What are you going to do? I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Something he'll never see coming. The first thing I did was make sure he never suspected a thing. That night, when Jonathan came home, I greeted him as I always did. I made dinner, set the table, and listened to him complain about his exhausting day. I even laughed at his half-hearted jokes, the same ones that once made me adore him. He kissed my cheek as he always did, murmured some excuse about an early morning meeting, and went to bed. I watched him sleep, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, the peaceful ignorance on his face. I wondered if he had ever truly known me. If he had, he would have realized his mistake wasn't just cheating. It was assuming I would stay quiet. He had underestimated me, and that would be his downfall. Jonathan thought he was untouchable. He thought I would be the quiet, dutiful wife, too blind to see his deception or too weak to do anything about it. He was wrong. The morning after my discovery, I kissed him goodbye at the door like nothing had changed. I smiled when he told me he'd be working late again. I waved as he walked to his car, his phone clutched tightly in his palm like a lifeline. And then, as soon as he was out of sight, I got to work. Jonathan had no idea who he was married to. He saw me as predictable, reliable. He had spent years underestimating me, seeing only the surface of who I was, a wife. A steady hand in the background of his ambitious climb. He had forgotten that I was more than that. I was a strategist. As a cybersecurity analyst, my entire job revolved around finding weaknesses in a system, exploiting vulnerabilities, gathering data without leaving a trace. And now I would do the same to him. I started with his laptop. It was our shared device, so he never bothered with extra security. A foolish oversight. His passwords were weak, his attempts at covering his tracks pitiful. I retrieved everything: emails, financial statements, hidden folders of conversations with women whose names I didn't recognize, hotel reservations under aliases, and the one that made my blood run cold, a search history filled with inquiries about divorce settlements, asset division, and the legality of spousal abandonment. He was already planning his exit, already calculating what he could take and what he could leave behind, and he thought he'd be the one in control. I closed the laptop and leaned back, inhaling deeply through my nose. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was war. For the next week, I laid the groundwork. I needed to dismantle him completely, piece by piece, until he had nothing left, and it had to be done in a way where he wouldn't suspect a thing until it was too late. Step 1. Follow the money. I combed through every financial document, every credit card statement, and cross-referenced them with locations and transactions. I needed to know exactly where he was spending, who he was spending it on, and more importantly, what he was hiding. And then I found it, a second bank account. One he had opened in secret, funneling money into it little by little, preparing for his clean break. I smiled. Step 2. Become the ghost in his machine. Jonathan was careless. He used the same passwords across multiple accounts. His dating profiles, his personal email, even his work login, they all had variations of the same security key. I infiltrated everything. With a few keystrokes, I redirected his backup emails to one of my own accounts. If he tried to recover a password, it would come to me first. If he received a security alert, I would see it before he did. He thought he was moving in secret. I was the shadow watching him the entire time. Step 3. Create the perfect illusion. I needed to bait him, to lure him into a trap so seamless he would walk into it willingly, thinking it was his own victory. I crafted a new identity. Victoria Lawson. She was everything Jonathan wanted. Young, beautiful, exciting, the kind of woman he thought he deserved now that he was emotionally free. With the help of AI-generated images and a perfectly curated profile, I brought Victoria to life. I made her irresistible. And within days of her existence, Jonathan took the bait. He messaged her first. Eager, charming, desperate. It took all my restraint not to laugh when I read his words. The same empty promises he had once whispered to me. The same rehearsed lines he had used to make me fall in love with him. I played my role well. Victoria flirted, teased, made him feel special. She pulled him in, making him believe she was just as eager to meet him as he was to meet her. And then, when I had him wrapped around my finger, I set the date. The night of his big promotion. The night he believed would be the beginning of his new life. Instead, it would be the night his world collapsed. I stared at my reflection in the mirror that evening. The woman I saw looking back at me, nothing like the one Jonathan had so carelessly discarded. He thought he was playing me. He had no idea I had already won. Jonathan had no idea that the walls around him were closing in. He thought he was standing on the precipice of his perfect life. His promotion was practically in his hands. His escape plan from our marriage set in motion. And in just a few hours, he would be sitting across from the woman he believed to be his future. Victoria Lawson, the woman of his dreams, the woman who didn't exist. I had spent weeks molding her into exactly what he wanted, the perfect blend of mystery and charm, a woman who made him feel desired, worshipped. And Jonathan, being the arrogant fool he was, took the bait without a second thought. He had no idea that while he was giddy with anticipation, checking his phone every few minutes for Victoria's messages, I was sitting right across from him at our kitchen table, watching the pieces of his life arrange themselves into the perfect trap. I had booked the restaurant myself, a high-end, dimly lit venue downtown, the kind Jonathan had always preferred when impressing someone new, a place where he would feel important, a place where he would feel untouchable, a place where, tonight, he would be utterly destroyed. Jonathan left the house early that evening, dressed in his best suit, whistling under his breath. He barely looked at me as he announced he'd be at a business dinner and that I shouldn't wait up. I smiled, nodded, and told him to have a great night. Then I watched him walk out the door and into his own execution. By the time I arrived at the restaurant, everything was already set in motion. I had arrived early, making sure that the manager, who I had called in advance, understood my request. Jonathan was given the best table in the house. A candle flickered between two empty glasses of wine. He had already ordered Victoria's drink something expensive and impressive, meant to show that he was a man of taste. He sat there, checking his phone repeatedly, his knee bouncing slightly under the table. He was nervous, excited, pathetic. I watched from a quiet corner, my heart steady, my mind sharp. I wanted to savor this moment, the final, blissful seconds before the fall. Then, with a deep breath, I stepped forward. The moment his eyes landed on me, I saw it. The flicker of confusion. The quick, desperate calculation happening behind his gaze. He opened his mouth, probably to spin a last-minute lie, but I didn't give him the chance. I pulled out the chair opposite him, sat down, and smiled. Expecting someone else? Jonathan's face drained of color. His fingers twitched toward his phone, no doubt thinking of a way out, a lifeline. I beat him to it. I placed the envelope on the table between us, the thick, damning weight of it making a soft thud against the polished wood. His eyes darted to it, then back to me. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely steady. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Why don't you open it and find out?" Slowly, hesitantly, he reached forward and pulled the envelope toward him. I watched his fingers tremble slightly as he unsealed it and slid out the contents. Printouts of every dating profile he had created, screenshots of his conversations, copies of the hotel reservations, and at the very bottom the divorce papers, signed and ready. For a moment, he just stared. The restaurant faded into a hush around us, the clinking of glasses, the murmurs of conversations seeming to stretch into an eerie silence. I watched the truth settle over him, the weight of his own actions crushing down, suffocating him. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something real in his eyes. Fear. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice soft, intimate. "Victoria doesn't exist, Jonathan." "She never did." He blinked. Once, twice. Then he let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair, grasping for control. "Alicia, listen." I held up a finger, stopping him mid-sentence. "No, Jonathan, you listen." I reached into my bag and pulled out one final piece of evidence, a small, velvet box, the watch I had bought him, the one he never cared to open, the one that sat untouched, unappreciated. I placed it gently next to the papers. "You're going to need this," I said, my smile razor sharp, "to make it to court on time." Jonathan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You don't have to do this." "Oh, but I do." I tapped the papers. "Because unlike you, I honor my commitments." I stood, grabbing my coat, feeling the shift in power like a physical force. He was small now, insignificant. Just another liar exposed, another coward backed into a corner. I turned to leave, but paused, glancing over my shoulder. "By the way," I said, tilting my head, "your promotion?" His mouth barely opened before I continued. "I sent your employer copies of your extracurricular activities this morning. They have a strict policy on professional ethics, don't they?" The blood drained from his face completely. "You?" I smiled. "Goodbye, Jonathan." And just like that, I walked out, not as his wife, not as the woman he thought he could manipulate, but as the woman who had just ended him. Jonathan didn't call me that night. I wasn't surprised. There was nothing left to say. By the time I walked out of that restaurant, I had stripped him of everything he thought he controlled. His secret life, his carefully laid out escape plan, his precious promotion, all of it lay in ruins at his feet. And the best part? He still had no idea just how much further he was about to fall. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, my phone resting beside me. I had slept like a baby, the kind of sleep that comes after months of silent rage finally being set free. The first call came at 8:32 a.m. Jonathan's boss. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 9:15 a.m. Jonathan himself. I smiled as I declined it. The third came at 10:03 a.m. A number I didn't recognize, but one I had been expecting. I answered, keeping my voice sweet and polite. "Hello, Mrs. Morrison? This is William Carter from HR at Sterling and Price. I was wondering if you had time to discuss a few matters concerning Jonathan Morrison." I took another sip of coffee, savoring the moment. "Of course. How can I help?" Sterling and Price had a very strict morality clause for their executives. Jonathan, in his arrogance, had assumed he was untouchable, that his professional success would shield him from consequences. But businesses like his cared about one thing above all else: reputation. And nothing destroyed reputations faster than scandals. I had been meticulous in my approach. I didn't just send HR the proof of his infidelity. That alone wouldn't have been enough. Men like Jonathan survived affairs all the time. But fraud? That was different. You see, Jonathan wasn't just sneaking around behind my back. He had also been expensing his dates. Five-star dinners, hotel suites, luxurious gifts, all conveniently charged to his corporate account under client entertainment. And I had the receipts, all neatly packaged and forwarded with a professional yet damning email. By the time I hung up with HR, Jonathan's world had already begun crumbling. And I wasn't done yet. At noon, I walked into our bank, armed with the knowledge I had gathered during my deep dive into his finances. Jonathan had been funneling money into a separate account for months, preparing for his grand exit. Too bad for him. The account was still in both our names. With a calm smile, I withdrew every last cent and moved it into my own personal account. By the time Jonathan realized what had happened, it would be too late. And just because I could, I left a single dollar in the account, a parting gift. Let him stare at the pathetic balance and feel what it was like to be left with nothing. At 3:00 p.m., I arrived at our house with the locksmith. Jonathan had made a critical mistake in his exit strategy. He had assumed he had more time. He had underestimated me. The locks were changed within the hour. His clothes? Packed into garbage bags and left neatly on the porch. His personal laptop? Wiped clean and set beside them. By 4:30 p.m., I was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, watching through the window as Jonathan's car pulled into the driveway. I could see the exact moment he realized something was wrong. The hesitation as he reached for his keys, the flicker of confusion when the lock wouldn't turn. Then, the slow turn of his head as he spotted his belongings stacked outside like discarded trash. He stood there for a long moment, as if his brain refused to process what was happening. Then, his phone flew to his ear. Mine vibrated on the coffee table. I let it ring. Then, finally, I stood, opened the front door, and stepped onto the porch. His eyes snapped to mine. "Alicia," he breathed, his voice thick with something between anger and desperation. "What the hell is this?" I took a sip of wine, savoring the taste before I answered. "This? This is what happens when you mistake me for a fool." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off of him. "We need to talk," I laughed, the sound light and almost cruel. "Oh, Jonathan, we are way past talking." His jaw tightened. "You can't just throw me out." I tilted my head. "Actually, I can. Turns out when you're cheating on your wife and plotting to leave her, the courts tend to side with the wronged party." His nostrils flared, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed in his hand. I saw his face change as he read whatever message had just come through. His boss, maybe, or HR, maybe the bank, informing him of his empty account. One by one, his lifelines were snapping, leaving him adrift in a storm he never saw coming. He looked up at me, and for the first time, there was something raw in his eyes. Panic. "Alicia, please," I held up a hand, silencing him. "Don't. Just don't." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I didn't mean for it to be like this." I smiled, slow and sharp. "That's the thing, Jonathan. You never thought past yourself. You never thought about what would happen when the person you betrayed decided to fight back." I stepped back inside and met his gaze one last time. "You wanted a new life? Congratulations. You have one. Just not the one you planned." Then, without another word, I closed the door in his face and locked it. The silence after the storm was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Jonathan was gone. The house, once filled with the weight of his lies, felt lighter now. The air was cleaner. The space was mine again, untainted by his presence. For the first few days, I kept expecting him to come back, to knock on the door, to demand explanations, to beg. But there was nothing. And I knew why. He had nothing left. His job, gone. His money, gone. His reputation, in ruins. I had watched the fallout unfold from a distance, like an observer to a beautifully orchestrated disaster. Jonathan tried to fight back at first, pleading with HR, insisting that he could explain. But the evidence I provided was too airtight, too damning. He didn't just lose his promotion, he lost his career. No company would touch him now. His credit cards were frozen. his name blacklisted in the industry he had once ruled over with arrogant confidence. And as for his side affairs, they disappeared the moment his world crumbled. Women like the ones he chased weren't interested in a man with nothing to offer. It took exactly 2 weeks before I received the first email. Not an apology, not remorse, just a pathetic attempt at justification. Alicia, you didn't have to do this. I read it, then deleted it without a second thought. There was no point in responding. Jonathan was already drowning, and I had no interest in throwing him a lifeline. With Jonathan out of the picture, I focused on rebuilding. I accepted a new job, one that doubled my salary, something I had hesitated to pursue before because Jonathan never wanted me to outshine him. I bought a new house, a small, cozy place with a garden. The kind of home Jonathan had always dismissed as in too much work. I surrounded myself with people who mattered, friends who had seen the cracks in my marriage long before I had, people who reminded me, over late night wine and laughter, that I had always been more than someone's wife. One evening, as I was packing up the last of Jonathan's remnants from my life, I found the watch I had given him, the one he had never cared enough to open. I held it in my hands for a long moment, turning it over, feeling the weight of it. Then I smiled, walked outside, and tossed it into the lake behind my new house. It sank without a trace. Gone. Just like him. Months later, I saw him again. Not in person. No, Jonathan wouldn't dare. But his face appeared in a news article that a friend forwarded me. A small, almost pathetic mention in a financial blog. Former Sterling and Price executive, Jonathan Morrison, files for bankruptcy following a series of personal and professional setbacks. I stared at the headline for a moment, letting it settle in. Then, without hesitation, I deleted the message. His story was no longer my concern. Mine was just beginning.